thank you all for coming. For those of you who don't know me, I've got my name conveniently placed on this slide that you've seen for the last 5 minutes or so. Contrary to popular belief, my name is not pronounced Nick Uhlenhuth. It's actually just Nick Uhlenhuth. So just call me Nick Uhlenhuth. We'll be good. I'll probably still respond to the first one, though. I'm a program manager for Visual Studio, C++, and my main focus area is on developer productivity. So anything in the IDE that I can do to make C++ developers more productive. Most of this talk is going to be a demo, but before I get into that, I just want to take some time to go over what I mean by permissive C++ and modern C++. So permissive C++ is in reference to older versions of the MSVC compiler, which allowed permissive behaviors. Since then, we have introduced a flag called permissive minus, which gets rid of those permissive behaviors and is allowing you to write strictly conformant code. But there's a chance that if you're a legacy user, you may have been writing code that wasn't necessarily strictly conformant. And just to show an example of that, I'll switch over to this project here. So I'll run it really quick. Basically what we have here, we'll go ahead and duplicate. I thought I switched it to that. Hopefully that works. Boom. All right, cool. So what I've got here is a function f, takes a string, and it puts string in the console. Then I've got a template, and within that, I have g, which is calling f with a double. And then below the template, I have f here, which takes in a double and puts a double into the console. And you can see it printed out double here when I ran it. This code shouldn't have compiled if we were going on strict conformance, because what happens is before, compilers were allowed to wait until the template was actually instantiated, which would be down here in the main, and by then, this f of double was parsed. But now if you enable permissive minus, which you can do by right-clicking on your project, go to project properties, and then under C++ language, instead of conformance, which is set to no right now, we can switch that to yes. And so now when I run this, if everything goes well, things won't go well. So yeah, we get a build error. And that's because right now f is, like the parser saw f as a string, and then when it goes into the template body, it's actually parsing the template there rather than waiting until the instantiation. So this is strictly conformant now, and if you wanted to still keep this code, you could potentially like move this function up above that template definition. So that's an example of permissive behavior that now, if you are using Visual Studio 2019, you can still, if you've written code that has these permissive behaviors, it'll still work, but new project templates have permissive minus on by default, so you can think of that as not permissive, which is on by default now for new templates. In that same project property dialog, in the second to last row, you can see the C++ language standard. It's set to default right now, which is C++ 14, but you can change that to C++ 17 if you want to use the latest C++ features of C++ 17, or if you're super cutting edge, you can go ahead and change that to C++ latest, and you can see, you start playing around with our latest implementation of the C++ 20 standard. The good news is MSVC compiler is C++ 17 complete, with the exception of preprocessor, which is experimental, and then the STL is C++ 17 complete. So you can play around with these language features of C++ 17, and C++ has a great backwards compatibility story, so even if you have older C++ code, it should still work, but you'll be able to start taking advantage of these newer language features. And like I said, my main focus is on the IDE. So I want to go over ways that the IDE can actually help you to start upgrading your code to modern C++. It would be great if there were just a one-click button, but that doesn't exist yet. If you have ideas on that, definitely let me know. But in the meantime, I'll cover some things that are currently in the IDE. So we have quick actions, which appear as light bulbs. They're, you may have seen them in the editor. We have screwdrivers, which you may or may not have seen, but we'll see those in a second. There's also quick info, which is just what we call the tooltips. So if you hover over a piece of code, you get the tooltip. We call it the quick info tooltip, and that can help you a lot with understanding code, especially modern code. And then lastly, I'll go over some code analysis. And this talk, I'll be focusing mainly on the code analysis of the C++ core guidelines, so ways that you can adhere to those guidelines. That's enough talking for now. We'll go ahead and switch to the demo, and hopefully my screen will cooperate. Yes, all right, sweet. So I'll run this to start off. And what I have here is a project that I'm working on. It's relatively simple. You can see in the Solution Explorer, I've got bus, rows, seats, people, things like that. So this is a little app that prints out a seating chart of a bus. I removed Sally from the bus, so you can see the X where that used to be in her seat is now gone. At the very end, I calculate the average number of passengers per row, which is 0.2 because there's one passenger, 5 rows. And the last thing I want to point out is that the driver can either be a captain, which is like a human driver, or the driver could be a robot, which you think of like an AI driver or something like that. And they both have numbers. So that's the gist of the app. Since it revolves around a bus, we'll go into the bus file. That's where most of the magic happens. And as I'm scrolling through this file, if you're not familiar with Visual Studio 2019, these colors might seem new to you. We've added a new default semantic colorization to help you understand your code more quickly at a glance. And you can see here, this macro color is a bright purple. And if I hover over that, as usual, I can see the expansion of the macro right in that quick info tooltip to help me understand the code. But modern C++ sort of frowns upon macros, so let's see what we can do about that. If I right-click, I can go to the definition, and then here's the screwdriver I was telling you about. This lets me know that there's a quick action here that's going to alter my code. And if I click the down arrow, I can see I can convert that macro to a const expr with just a click of a button. It'll give me a little preview of what it'll look like, so I can click through these different instances and make sure everything looks good in the preview window. It looks good to me, so I'll apply that. And now I've got this const expr function. It's even using auto there, which is modern C++. And if I'm scrolling down to the previous call site here, you can see average no longer is that purple color. It's the brown color of a function, so I know that that conversion worked. Everything looked good. And also, I want to point out here in quick info, can you see my, yeah, you can't see my mouse. Cool. So in quick info, that auto word now says float. So the deduced type of auto is apparent in quick info, which can help me understand the return type of this code. So auto's great if you're writing new code, especially if it's heavily templated code. You don't have to worry about typing every single character out. You can just type auto. But then if you're looking at code, it can be a little bit hard to understand. So here's this range-based for loop here, which is using auto. But I might not really know what row is, like if I'm new to this code base and trying to understand it, because auto doesn't have a type there. But if I hover over it, you can see it's of type capital R row, and quick info is now colorized, so that type stands out to me. But if I'm really new to the code base, I might not even know what row is. And in that case, I want to search for that type. So if I use Control-T, then this is our go to all search, which you may or may not be familiar with. It's been in the product for a while, but when I talk to people, they don't always know what it is. But it's an awesome feature and allows you to search really quickly. If you type a question mark, you can see all the different filtering that you can do for your search. For example, if you prepend your search with an F, you'll limit your search to just files. In this case, I'm looking for a type, so I'm going to prepend it with T, and then start typing row, and there's a type called row. Takes me right into that row.h file. And while we're here, I want to call out something that you may have seen in the previous file, and that's these green squiggles that are appearing in the editor. So this number 3 has a green squiggle under it, and that's code analysis. If you hover over it, you can see what that code analysis warning is. In this case, it's telling me that the const variable row capacity can be computed at compile time, so I should consider using a const expr. Sounds good to me. You can also see down in this document health indicator that I have one warning in this file, and that's referring to this code analysis warning here. So if I change const to const expr and save the file, this green squiggle is going to disappear. And now in my document health indicator, you can see that there's no issues found. So that file is looking good. I'm in my process of modernizing this code base now. However, if I go over to my error list, I can see that throughout my solution, I have about 7 more warnings. In your all's cases, in your code bases, you might have way more than that, especially if you're on a legacy code base. So I do want to just touch quickly on how you can start prioritizing your modernization effort. If you right-click on the project and go back into this project properties that we saw before, which is where we put the permissive minus flag and things like that, there's a code analysis tab. In here, I can alter my active rule set. And this brings up all of these rules that we have for code analysis. And so if there's rules that you don't want to see in your editor or you don't want those squiggles to appear, you can just turn them off here if you want. It also has a nice search feature. So if I am looking for specifically a rule that involves new, like this no new or delete. You can click on that. You can even see a description down here of what the rule is. So you shouldn't be using new and delete explicitly. Instead, use make unique. For now, though, I don't want to turn off any more rules. What I want to do instead, oh, also one last thing is you can also filter this to either your current document or the entire solution, things like that. But the filtering that I want to show is within this code column itself, I can just limit it to just one error. So I can focus only on this one, no new or delete warning, and start attacking that now. And if I see over here at the file and line, they're all in the same file and similar line numbers. So I'll just double click on one of those and it'll take me right to the offending piece of code. So here's those green squiggles. Obviously, this is where that new offending piece is. And so I want to start using a unique pointer here. So I'll go make unique, if I can type. And I'm getting an error here because now I've got a unique pointer on one side, but engine is an engine raw pointer here. Oh, also let me just take a second. So what's happening here is we have this enum up here of engine type, and then based on the switch, we're either generating a new small, medium, or large engine. But this is a raw pointer, so we're going to need to peek the definition here so that I can stay in the context of my code, but change this from being a raw pointer to a unique pointer. Auto-completion is working just fine with that. All right, and then I can save. And now the green squiggle in this row has gone away because we're no longer using new, we're using make unique. So everything's looking good, and we can just quickly do the same thing for these other ones. And then for the next one, though, I want you to pay extra close attention because I know you all didn't think you were coming to a magic show today, but what you're about to see is quite magical. So at the top of this member list, it says make unique, and there's a star next to it. If you don't already know, in Visual Studio 2019, IntelliCode is on by default for C++, and it's taking the context of my code. So it's seeing how I've used this std namespace before, and based on that context, it's saying, well, I think you're going to want to use make unique again here. And this is a machine-learned algorithm over thousands of repos, and based on that, it's able to give me a good recommendation here. So I'll accept that and finish off here. And now all of my green squiggles within my cases, my switch cases, have gone away. But you can see my health indicator now actually has an error. It's down here where I'm deleting that engine pointer. I actually don't need to worry about that now, though, because I'm using unique pointer, so that's taken care of for me. And now we just have 2 more warnings in this file. So down here we see enum type, engine type is unscoped, and I should be using an enum class. Well, the reason for that is because in an enum class, the values won't implicitly convert to an integer or another enum, so you're less likely to have weird surprises there. So that seems like a good suggestion to me. So again, we can just peek the definition so that I don't go jumping around all over the place, and just change that to an enum class. Save it. Simple as that. The green squiggle is going to go away, I hope. Yep, boom, nailed it. And now we just have one last warning that we can see here. And also, I want to point out in the scroll bar, there's this dark green square here, which shows me where the dark green squiggles are in my code base. And I can see right there that down at the bottom is where my last issue is. Here it's giving me the same thing because I'm switching on this enum here for driver type. So I could change that to an enum class and make that go away. But I actually want to show you something even better. If I go up to the top of my code here, here's where I have that driver type enum. And like I said, they can be either a robot or a captain. And then I have it sort of paired with this union here, where I have a union just called driver, and then I have a robot type or a captain type in there. And those are sort of paired up, and then based on that, I'm getting either the robot part of my driver union or the captain part of the driver union. So it's a little bit messy, a little hard to follow, but it's relatively common with older C++. And so here's what I'm going to do to address that. I'm not going to need any of this stuff anymore. But obviously, I'm going to start getting squiggles because now that union doesn't exist. But instead of this union, I'm going to use a variant. So std variant, and it can either be robot or a captain. And now I'm getting some errors here. which is not great because I'm trying to modernize here, so I don't want stuff to be challenging. But Visual Studio is here to help me out. It says I'm missing this pound include for variant. So I might not be familiar with what I need to include to get all this stuff to work if I'm new to these new language features. Visual Studio had a nice little quick action there. If I look up towards the top of my document, you can see pound include variant was just added at the bottom of my includes up at the top. And now there's no more squiggles here. But obviously, since I changed the type of driver, I do have a few more issues here. So that's no longer a union, it's now a variant. And then that'll go away. And now we can go back to what we were focusing on before. So I got rid of the enum. We're no longer going to need to switch on that. And I'm also going to get rid of all this logic. I can actually use Control-Shift/, and that's like toggle block comment. And what I'm going to do is create this little helper struct here for the operator for me. So I need a callable here. I'm going to call it visit driver number because we're going to be using stood visit in a second. And so I'll just create this little operator here for the robot case. And in this case, I just want to return the r.robotID. And then we'll do the same thing for captain. We'll overload this here. If I can find the ampersand, there we go. Boom. All right. So that's what we're going to be using. And now inside the body of get driver number, it's super simple. We're just going to return stood visit. And then we'll have this callable that I just made and the variant. And a semicolon. All right, sweet. So that's all, instead of all this switch logic and everything, now we just have this one line in here, and we have this callable, and based on that, based on this variant, it'll use the right version of that operator. All right. If I go back into the main, we no longer need this driver union. We got rid of the union because we're using a variant now, and we can feed the captain directly into this driver assignment rather than having to feed the union in and then getting the captain element based on the switching on the whole enum, all that stuff. We can just put a captain directly into the driver seat. Get driver number no longer needs that enum because we were using stood visit, same with here. We're no longer using the union, and we can feed a robot directly into assigned driver because again, this driver, or this assigned driver function is just expecting a variant of robot or captain. R is a robot, so it's totally good. All right, we should be able to run here, and if everything goes well, we'll get the exact same output, even though we just changed a good amount of code, but now our code's more modernized. It's easier to read. We no longer have to deal with that pointer, new and delete management, things like that. Take a second here, boom, all right. So yeah, exact same output here, I promise. Everything worked. Then, oh, there's actually one last thing I wanted to show. Within this bus, so I printed out the seating chart, and I printed that out to the console. But I also have a function here where I print out to a file. And in this case, it's not too hard to read this file path because the new semantic colorization, we've colorized the escape characters in the string. But it's still pretty odd to have double slashes in a file path. But if you right-click, you can see the quick actions and refactorings, and we have a quick action here to convert to a raw string literal, and now it looks like a normal file path, and it's converted it to a raw string literal. Sweet. That's everything that I wanted to show in that demo. Checking the time real quick, and we can switch back. I know that was a lot to see. So here's a quick little recap of the different IDE features that can help you here. So we had the semantic colorization. We saw the color of the macro changing from purple to brown once we used a const expr. We saw the expansion of the macro in the quick info tooltip, and also the const expr gets expanded in quick info. The deduce type of auto is seen in quick info, which can help you understanding newer code that's more modernized that maybe you're not familiar with. Then we saw the code analysis guidelines around the core C++ core guidelines. So we were able to use enum class, make unique, stood variant, and then lastly, convert to a raw string literal was just one final quick action in there that I wanted to show. So I would love it if you all would try out Visual Studio 2019 and let me know about these modernization features. You can download it at that link. Also follow our blog. We have posts about modernization, but also just any sort of productivity features in general. That's like the first place that we post it, so it's a good idea to look at that. And then as usual, you can give us suggestions in the developer community. And then lastly, in the bottom left here, I have our team's Twitter handle and my Twitter handle if you want to tweet us things. If you have nice things to tweet me, just go ahead and do that. If they're mean, just slide in the DMs. People don't need to see that. Then my talk, like I said, the code analysis portion, I was looking at things that adhere to the core guidelines, but there is a talk on lifetime analysis, which is the lifetime checks of code analysis, which should be a great talk. That's tomorrow from 14 o'clock to 15 o'clock, which I can't do that math right now, so if y'all can figure that out. Then, what was it? Yeah, boom, nailed it. C++ 20, that should be a good talk, especially if you're trying to use stood latest, so that flag that I saw in the project properties page where you can set it to C++ 17 or stood latest. Hopefully there'll be some good content there. Lastly, yesterday, Marion gave a talk on the latest and greatest features of Visual Studio, so not just modernization features, but productivity in general and like Azure DevOps pipelines. It was an awesome talk. He covered a lot of material, super informative, highly recommend it. He's also my boss, so any good things I can say about his talk on stage is great. It should be hopefully a recording online somewhere. Lastly, come by our booth. I don't know how much time we have left. Hopefully we can ask some questions here, and I'll be around right after this, but we also do have a booth Monday through Thursday, which you've probably already walked by, but I'll be floating around there, so will other people on the team who are much smarter than I am, so definitely swing by there. And I think that's, we also have a survey where you can win an Xbox, so that's cool. All right, that's everything. Any questions? Yeah.
How hard is it to, on average, do you think, to change the compiler from MSVC 14 to 14.1.2, whatever 2019 is using?
How hard is it? So.
Because we upgraded from like 10 to 11, that was a bitch. And then 11 to 12 was easier, 13 was a little easier.
That's a good question. I like that answer. Yeah.
Suggestion? Colorize the raw string and the literal bounds so that you can tell the string from the
Yeah, I actually think it is, but it is a red color as well. So yeah, I totally can see, like this, you're talking about right here. Maybe the projector's not picking it up super well, but this part is colored a different red than the rest of it.
The other thing is the biggest productivity thing would be a 64-bit version of Visual Studio, so it can hold more than a couple hundred projects.
I have heard that
All
before.
those fancy things, you can actually give them to all the projects that use them.
Noted. Yeah.
I've been, I don't know if this is working. I've been, I guess not. Big fan of Visual Studio 2019. I've been running the previews. Been working
Sweet.
out pretty well. Are there plans to add quick fixes for like the automated static analysis, or the static analysis that runs in the background?
So like the green squiggle stuff? Yeah, so there are, I believe there are some quick fixes for some of them, and we are always looking for ones that we can easily put a quick fix for. So yeah, we are looking at that.
With the ability to turn on and off the various warnings that you had
Yeah.
in the previous talk that was on Monday, they mentioned the cloud management of the settings of that. Is these warning settings part of that cloud management as well?
I'm actually not entirely sure how that's going to work out, but maybe come by the booth and someone can answer there. Yeah, sorry. Oh, also one thing I forgot to mention is all the code analysis stuff works for CMake projects as well. Like in this, I'm using a VCX proj here, but all the code analysis, rule set stuff will, and green squiggles, all that, if you're using CMake, will totally work. Alrighty. Thank you.